This is not a test. Stay calm in an orderly fashion. Make your way to the lifeboats.
Mayday, the ship is sinking.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Monday. This is part 2 of a thinking about 4-part podcast where we're talking about the science of addiction on the brain. If this is your first time tuning in, this is part 2. So part 1 was last Monday, so you can go back and listen to that, where Dr. Deb, who is our speaker over the course of these 4 Mondays, talks a little bit about brain chemistry and how that has to relate to addiction. Today, she is going to be giving us insight on alcohol, but I don't want to take up any more time. So with that being said, Dr. Deb, it's your show.
Hi. Well, thanks, Christian, for that. And again, I just want to clarify that I am giving you information that's based on years of work in the field, and that I'm going to encourage you right from the beginning, if you're interested in anything that we're talking about, please go and study from NIH or from NIAAA or from some of the bigger names in this disorder, so that you can become a good student and just maybe use what I'm saying as a launch pad. Today we're going to talk about alcohol and alcohol's impact on your behavioral lifestyles, by your behavior. Just talking about your behavior, some of the properties underneath of it, what is this notion of tolerance and withdrawal, very important stuff to think about in terms of alcohol, and how we adapt, the neurological adaptations to the drugs, and then finally some treatment about the drugs. First and foremost, alcohol has been around since, the first fermented fruits in the Old Testament and all the ancient Near East texts. Alcohol has always been a part of the society. Not all alcohol use is bad. Alcohol has been used in celebrations. Alcohol has been used in christenings, in, the famous ship, taking the bottle of champagne. We see it as a celebration. But there's times when alcohol can get out of control, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So I don't want you to walk away from today saying like, oh, alcohol is all bad. It's no. In some portions of the population, this is what you need to kind of figure out. When you're working with an alcohol abusing or an alcohol dependent person, there's some other things that you might be experiencing before you ever know that that person is actually abusing alcohol. In my practice, it's one of those things where I deal a lot with mental health persons coming in with some, like syndromes, like I'm feeling kind of depressed, and I'm feeling, pretty anxious, or I feel like I'm all over the map. Well, one day I'm up here, and another day I'm over here. And, we all want to put on some kind of words onto that, right? Oh, depression, or, oh, they must have generalized anxiety disorder. Oh, they must be bipolar because one day they're over here and one day they're over there. We can also see some really complex things where the depression is so great it causes anxiety, and so that the anxiety and the depression happen on top of each other. But it's not this polarity that you get in bipolar disorder. And we want to ascribe all sorts of not fun, I'm being facetious, but diagnoses to this. What I'm going to tell you this is that if you're dealing in your practice with individuals who have mild depression, who have mild anxiety disorders, they feel like they're cycling on either side, they've got some life stressors, do yourself a favor, ask them how much they're drinking, just right from the get-go. And if you ask them right from the get-go, they might think like, well, I only have 1 or 2 beers, doc, now and then. My famous comeback line is, and how big are those beers? Are they 12 ounces or are they double deuces? Well, now we're starting to get someplace. Or, what to you is a couple? when I ask you, you know, how much liquor you're ingesting. The idea is not to indict the person. The reality is behaviorally, alcohol in of itself, in certain portions of the population, can cause depression-like behaviors, depression-like characteristics, feeling down. Some people might call it a hangover. Another person might say, like, you know, I'm just down for days. I light up. You know, questions that you want to know. Well, when you drink, is there a place in your drinking profile that, you know, you might be getting tired, then all of a sudden you perk up, you wake up? Yeah. Or you ask them, like, can the sound of that can of beer just set you? Like, that's a Friday night sound. When that can of beer opens, is that sort of like, woo, yeah, I'm feeling okay? Do you count your drinks? Do you count your straws? Do you count the number of toothpicks that the olives came on? That's when you start to think about some behavioral adaptations. And you're starting to understand that maybe alcohol might just play a role. There was a recent publication in the NIAAA magazine that I subscribe to, and it described a 50-year-old that presented in the emergency saying that they wanted to die, that they felt suicidal. And as they were talking to them about this depressive mood, the doctor was talking to them, they were talking about feelings of guilt, occasional suicidal ideations that have grown into intensity. They were going on and on and on. They were talking about that they've had a low mood and demoralization, and acknowledged later on that they really don't want to kill themselves, but they don't know how to get out of where they are. In this case, this person presented with a variety of mental health concerns. Yet, as the doctor went on in this example that was given, they began to probe them about how much they were drinking. And they would always get this feeling of anxiety and depression when? Monday morning on the way to work. They thought it had everything to do with their Monday morning on the way to work. The doctor backed it up. So what was your Thursday, Friday, and Thirsty Thursdays through Warrior Saturday? What did that look like? The person was binging alcohol, having a good time, life was great. You could have predicted that as that alcohol was coming out of their system over the course of Sunday, that their body would go into some type of panic response on Monday. Well, that's a lot of physiological stuff that I know our doctors are going to talk about, you know, the pancreas and about the liver and about the kidneys and all of that piece. But their symptomology, their behavioral cues were focused all on mental health. I must be going off the deep end. And as they talked to that person about what their alcohol intake was, it's not like it solved everything, because alcohol was their way of celebration. They celebrated. This was good. They had a great life. Life was wonderful. Didn't understand why the wheels were falling off on Monday morning. But as that person began to not drink as much and eventually stop drinking, guess what went away? The anxiety, the depression, the feelings of uselessness, the demoralization. They were being induced because what I said last week, right? A drug was doing what it was intended to do. The drug is a central nervous system depressant. Alcohol is, as I said before, it's a sedative hypnotic. There's a thing, look it up, Gaba receptor. It's a Gaba receptor. That receptor is impacted with alcohol use. And what it does is it just sort of slows you down, makes you come into this wonderful plane. So those of you who drink and drink socially, you know what it's like. You're out with some friends, you have a beer, you maybe have a glass of wine, you're just like, life is good. And you're able to stop. Well, in certain people, those GABA receptors go like, yeah, I want some more. I like it. And I'm doing sloppy science. That's really weak. But that's what it's hitting on in your head. Your head is saying like, This feels good. Let's do it some more. And you wind up, you have the sensation of an impaired memory. Your body doesn't really remember everything that's going on. You're starting to shut down. Give you another example. Have you ever been in a bar the morning after the night before? It stinks to high heaven. First thing when you open up the door, back when we could smoke in bars, right? You'd have the smell of cigarette smoke and stale beer. That would be the smell of a bar. Why didn't it smell that way the night before? Well, because the process of alcohol begins to shut down your sense of taste, your sense of smell, your vision, your whole sensory system is going into reserve mode to facilitate the alcohol. And we know that in certain portions of the population that they can actually drink themselves to death in a single alcohol intoxicated moment where they get alcohol poisoning. And we hear about that happening in college campuses or in high schools. That's where it's most common, where the person is drinking so much that their body shuts down. They go, it's a central nervous system depressant. So what does the central nervous system do when it overused? It's been alcohol has been overused. It shuts down. So your heart rate slows, your breathing slows, everything slows. And if it goes to the point of poisoning, it just shuts off. Not everybody who dies of alcohol poisoning dies because they throw up and then inhale the throw up. Sometimes they just die because everything shuts down. Alcohol is also another one of these crazy drugs. Unless there's an underlying health condition, the withdrawal from alcohol itself can cause death. So when you get to that point where the alcohol is overused to the point where it's habituated, I want to get this out right away. Seek medical attention. Don't try to suffer through a detox moment with alcohol by yourself. Some people have, it's happened for years, but can be kind of dangerous. Now, when you're talking about tolerance, now when we're looking at the molecular, when we look at tolerance, it's because there's been so much built up in the system that the alcohol no longer has the same effect. So for example, when we were kids, right, and we drank a beer at 16 or 17, woo, that one beer would rush in our body and we would be lit. Yet when we got older, that one beer was now 3 beers and we would feel okay. Many people, overdrink. The National Institutes of Health say that no more than 2 alcohol-based drinks per any one drinking event for men, and no more than 1 alcohol-based drink for any drinking event for women. No more than 14 alcohol-based drinks in any 1 week for men, and no more than 7 alcohol-based drinks for women in any 1 drinking week. And it's not like you can save them up. It's not like, okay, I'm not going to drink for 5 days and I'm going to have them all on Saturday. That's not how it works. That those are the parameters. Anything above that parameter of two alcohol-based drinks or 1 alcohol-based drinks for genetic women can increase the potential for tolerance in an individual. Now, it also may not increase tolerance. You might be able to handle a couple of extra beers here and there, a couple extra drinks. But over time, you wind up having physiological impact. We'll see individuals develop diabetes or kidney problems or liver problems, or in some portions of the population, they'll wind up getting acid reflux because they may be able to tolerate the alcohol, but it's because it's a carcinogen that it's starting to eat away at their body. So behaviorally, you may be able to feel fine, but the molecular level, alcohol is a carcinogen. It can start taking away some of the health in an individual. Now, there is some other symptoms that you should be aware of because of the neurotransmitters and the way that heavy use of alcohol impacts the brain function and alters how the brain reacts. It can also impact negatively the hormonal system, particularly in women. Unfortunately, women are more negatively impacted. Genetic women are more negatively impacted by the use of alcohol because the hormonal system of the physiological woman, and this is just science, a physiological woman has a reproductive component. And that reproductive component is to be able to hold and to bear children. Whether they want to or not, I'm not into that race. The idea is that the hormonal system is such a delicate balance in women that you can be more negatively impacted by the use of heavy drinking. It's not saying that a glass of wine now and then for a man or a woman is a problem. It's not saying that. It's saying heavy alcohol use, okay? It can also, the mood disorders and the anxiety disorders can impact, and we see a lot of co-occurring generalized anxiety disorder. We see a lot of co-occurring depression, as I said earlier. The individual's vulnerability to experiencing these psychiatric mental health issues can necessarily not relate to smaller intakes. So that if I may be a person who's one glass of wine, this was my mother, one glass of wine, and she would have a migraine and she would be sick. My mother could not drink and she would get extremely depressed. So, she made a choice. That was on a small amount. My dad, on the other hand, my dad would have a highball after work every night and it would just not even be a big deal. The mental health components are not one size fits all, one gender fits all. The mental health components of alcohol use can be as varied as the drinks they ingest. I have known people who successfully were able to drink beer, but if they had mixed drinks, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, they weren't able to tolerate. Far be it for me to know all the ins and outs of that science, but it depends. It all depends on the individual. And what you have to look at, especially with alcohol use, if you're a family member, you may come from a system like my mom, where any alcohol use, now my mom didn't really care too much whether my dad had a highball or not, but in her family system, if you talk to her brothers and her parents, one drink was too many in my mother's side of the family. My mother's side of the family, tons of alcoholism. One drink she could not tolerate to see any of them drink because of the behaviors that they would engage in when they did drink. Saw it in my grandparents. They weren't exactly competent adults when they drank. They would become angry and abusive. It was just a chaos scene. My dad, never even thought of that from him. My dad could have a highball, not every night, but most nights when he would come home, and that would be it. I don't think I ever saw my dad really drink a beer. It was just highball, and I think a lot of it was social. That's how you showed the high life, is that you came home, you had a highball, and that was it. And I'll tell you, some days as I got older and was, starting to want to taste it and to engage in some alcohol behaviors myself, that drink was really weak. My dad, I think he just wove the cap over top of the mix. He wasn't a big drinker. It was more of the soda that he put in there than the alcohol. But it's two different cultures. My mother's side, behavioral, terrible people. My dad's side could have a drink and it was no big deal. So it's not this one size fits all. You have to realize too, that some people are going to show profound mental health, psychotic disorders. We know that there's individuals who present as antisocial, who, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde that you read about in the recovery books, who are the worst, dangerous people when they drink. They are angry and hurtful, and they are antisocial down to their socks. You take the alcohol out of them, and that's not even there for them. So when we're looking at some of the behavioral components, don't consider that just because somebody in your household is drinking, that it's bad. When they drink, how do they react? When that person, that husband, wife, child, grandparent, whoever in your kinship relationships is drinking, and they become aggressive, they say things with their mouth that in a sober moment they would never mean. If they exhibit depression, anxiety, if they can ingest a chemical alcohol, and that chemical alcohol has this response that requires them to change who they are, there is a problem. And it's not, you don't want, like, oh, you're an alcoholic, or you got this problem. It's not about that. It's about just the science. You ingest alcohol, you change. You continue to ingest alcohol, you change a lot. What you used to drink is not what you're drinking now. It used to be fun when we were dating, and now it's a Donnybrook every time you drink. It is the behavioral component that signals the problem. And that's why it's really difficult for me when I get individuals that say, no one should drink. Why? I know I shouldn't drink, not a good plan for me to drink, but I'm not going to say that you can't enjoy a glass of wine or a beer. I'll have my cup of coffee. I'll do just fine with that. Because my response to that alcohol is unattractive. Where your response to that alcohol, your behavioral response, no big shakes, okay? Now, on the molecular level, let's go to that. When we're talking about the changes in the brain chemistry, what we have to think about in the changes of the brain chemistry now has to do with frequency and quantity. Let me go back to an earlier statement. A person could be drinking more than the recommended limits. So, Uncle Louie from Poughkeepsie drinks 3 beers a night forever. Never has a problem, has a great life, hard worker, sweats it off. We all just don't even think about Uncle Louie from Poughkeepsie and his 3 beers because he's not displaying any of the problem behaviors that we look for. But on a molecular level, Uncle Louie from Poughkeepsie drinking 3 beers a night, maybe a couple shots in the weekend, great man, wonderful guy, is starting to have a physiological impact that is not visible to the rest of the world. How much he's drinking and how often that Uncle Louie is drinking can start negatively impacting his ability to avoid the alcohol from his system. Maybe he's building up a tolerance, and maybe it's starting to wear on his cardiovascular system. Or maybe he's starting to get what they call fatty liver syndrome, where his body's not able to void or process the alcohol properly. Alcohol is a 2-step process. It goes into the system and then it circles back around into the system before you actually void it. And you probably have thought about how, you learned this in elementary school about how food breaks down in your body and turns into all these different things that are good for your body. Well, alcohol, that's called metabolization. Alcohol metabolizes into a certain set of components the first time through. The second time through is the kicker. That's when all the damage starts happening. Not completely, but the majority of damage. The carcinogenic properties of that second pass can start wearing down your cardiovascular system, can start wearing down your liver, can start wearing down your kidneys, can start wearing down this, wearing down that, involving your pancreas, whole 9 yards. So a person's excessive use of alcohol may not give behavioral cues that are problematic, but you might start seeing some problems when they're 30, 40 years old and starting to have to go to the doctor and take medication. We also know that a huge, huge issue is when did that person start drinking to begin with? Let's talk first about in the molecular structure. We know the human body matures completely, give or take a week, I guess. But by the age of 25, it's all downhill, right? By the age of 25, every part of the body has been fully developed. Okay, we know that the formative years between 0 and 5 are pretty escalating. We know there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens during puberty. And then we know that there's this early adulthood. And the last of the brain development, it's around 25. We know that individuals who can put off alcohol use of any kind or any psychoactive substance use till past 25 is exponentially less likely to develop a disordered use of that product than individuals who ingest a product, an alcohol-based product, earlier than 25. Even 21 to 25, we have some wiggle room. It depends on how much they're drinking. But there is significant problems with underage drinking. If you're drinking as early as 9, 10, 11, 12, think about the adolescent body who's just now starting to develop into their adult body. You know, with biological men, the testicles drop. With biological women, they start menses. At that age, if you have introduced a carcinogenic property, you're veering off course of the natural development of that body, and that you are much more likely to develop an addiction to that drug of alcohol. You're much more likely to have early onset behavioral problems because of the alcohol, even in high school. So, you know, kids shouldn't be drinking before 15, but we know a portion of the population does, and it can have significant impairment on their physical and psychological development. And then we think about 15 to 18, well, that's just high school fun. They're just having a few drinks here and there. Well, we're not to 25 yet. And so it's not as pronounced as the younger one to 15, but 15 to 18, you're still racking up potential for development of a disorder. And we also know that in that age, because the body is surging with change between 15 and 18 in development of their secondary sex organs and, you know, developing hair under their arms and all that other good stuff, that we know that there's something going on hormonally in that age bracket. And now you're introducing a drug that's going to veer it off course. Now, the person's age and the level of education, the gender, genetic background, and family history of alcoholism can all play a role. And this role is a lot of behavioral as well as physiological. For example, if I have a child, that child is going to be 50% mom, 50% dad. And that that chain, that DNA chain is going to take in all of the markers of my family system and all the markers of the papa's family system, whoever the papa was. And when they put those together, you pass it on to your kid. So sometimes they'll say, oh, they look just like the mother, or oh, they look just like the father, or oh, he's got his, dad's eyes, or my gosh, when he talks on the phone, he sounds like Uncle Louie from Poughkeepsie, or when he smiles just a particular way, he looks like his Aunt Gladys. She had the most beautiful smile in the whole wide world. So that we look at some of the external things and we celebrate, oh, they're just like the other person. But they're also genetically carrying around some of the predispositions to weight, predispositions to education, predispositions to a lot of other things. And it's not to say that if a parent, we have so many people that came from families, systems where the they had to go out to work and they couldn't finish their education. I'm not saying it predicts that the adults in there that they birth are not going to go on for education, but they might have this push to get them educated because it's something that was taken away from them. So there's all sorts of external and internal behavioral cues in that system that celebrates the likenesses and downplays the deformities, downplays the, you probably shouldn't drink because on this one side of the family, 9 out of 10 people developed substance use disorder. And on the other side, I think they're 10 for 10 right now. Probably a good idea that you don't use because it's coming at you from both levels. And it talks about the dopamine receptor system being disrupted. It talks about the behavioral cues. If you're always going to parties as a kid and you're used to seeing, Aunt Gladys schnockered in the corner and everybody thinks it's kind of fun. Well, you might want to be like Aunt Gladys, who's schnockered in the corner and having a good time. It's just, and I'm not trying to be light, I'm not trying to be flip, but it's just there's a behavioral component of how we grow up and what we experience growing up is acceptable and not acceptable behavior. The results of us being at risk also is included, did our mother who birthed us, was there alcohol or drug use when they were being grown in the womb? Was that person shocked into detox? So the first several months of that baby, was there something else going on while the mother wasn't using, but was there anxiety or depression that was part of the kid? Now, again, I'm not a geneticist. I'm just a country therapist who studied some of this stuff, and Krishna would tell you probably, well, you got a pretty good pedigree for a person who's just kind of walking around. But these are things that you have to think about, that impact. And you also have to think about the general health of the individual, okay? Now, when we talk going on with alcohol, a guy named Wernicke back in the 70s developed all these different kinds of phenotypes of drinkers. You had the binger and you had the weekend warrior and you had the wino and you had all these different kinds. We do know that certain types of alcohol respond particular ways to different people. And we know that they damage individuals at a certain level. But at the end of the day, the development of tolerance goes by continual use of the product in ever increasing quantities. Now, some people will have the beauty of just throwing up at a certain point and being done and cannot drink past a certain level. Other people will throw up and continue to drink. And it has more to do with what I just went through. Now, when we talk about the brain and alcohol, people who have been drinking large amounts of alcohol for long periods of time run the risk of developing serious and ongoing changes in their brain behavior to the point that it is difficult for their brain to come back fully once the drug has been removed. We do know individuals who, with early onset of alcohol use in excessive quantities, have had difficulty dealing with issues of anxiety and depression for the balance of their life, because there's been some direct impact on the neurochemistry of the individual. Damage may be the result of these direct effects, and they also may be the result of indirect use. For example, if a person is drinking a lot, maybe they're not taking in the right nutrients, the building blocks of health. And so that it's the indirect effect of the alcohol becomes its own food group in this person's life. And fruits and vegetables and proteins and appropriate fibers are not being ingested. And so they wind up with this change in neurochemistry, more because of the poor health and the poor nutrition. but it was the contributing factor was their overuse of alcohol. Does that make sense? Okay. In a certain
It
portion
certainly
of
does.
in a certain portion of the populations, 80% of those who drink alcohol have a thiamine deficiency. 80%. And some of these people will develop severe thiamine deficient brain chemistry, and it's called Wernicke's Korsakoff syndrome, and we've often called it wet brain. It consists of some different syndromes together. Some are short-lived, some in the severe conditions, it actually alters the brain permanently, and it's debilitating. Now, it is a wearing away of certain parts of the brain inside so that they don't develop, or they stop development, or they actually atrophy. So I'm not a big scientist. I just know that wet brain is something that you may run across at times. And it's something that needs to be medically diagnosed. You can't, as a therapist, just say, oh, looks like Wernicke's. You know, it's not that way. It's something that has to be done medically. We do know that liver disease is a highly common problem, cirrhosis of the liver in heavy alcohol users. Cirrhosis happens over long-term drinking. Typically, we wind up first with fatty liver syndrome. And the organ, liver is this forgiving organ that's supposed to clean out the system. And it's responsible for breaking down the alcohol into these harmless byproducts. But eventually, it can stop working. And it can't really, it's one of those internal things that you don't really know that it's starting to degrade until you wind up having problems. We also know that hepatitis is a common, hepatitis C is a common form of hepatitis in individuals who are drinking excessively. You might see shaking in individuals who are detoxing from alcohol, where they're not able to hold on to another person's hands. We call, the shakes. Delirium tremens is actually not the shakes. Some people get confused. It's when people actually start hallucinating when they're stopping their use of alcohol. But you'll see some folks with the shakes that there's a motor interference in some portions of the population that doesn't go away. Now, there's a lot more that I can go through, but I think that the bottom line is, I kind of want to bring this around to the neurological adaptations. There can be external social cues that encourage an individual to drink. And that once they drink, that it solves some kind of issue that they wanted to solve. It makes them feel good. When I say solve an issue, I don't mean like something cataclysmic. I mean, somehow this ingestion of a chemical is causing them to feel good about something in their life, or it solves a problem. So what's the natural proclivity? Problem solved, let's do it again. Problem solved, let's do it again. And then it habituates. And in that habituation, depending on where you are in your development or your genetic predisposition, you can develop these disordered behaviors. You can develop these physiological problems inside. So let's then talk about this societal impact. When we say, well, the only time I had a choice in my drinking was on the first drink. I know there's a guy, Bubba Sheave, if you ever get a chance, he's from Stanford, to listen to him. He's in TED Talks and everything. I love this guy. I'm going to kind of bastardize experiment that he did, and I'm going to kind of make some of it up. And I'm going to come around to basically what the tenets of this experiment that he did. He talked about executive function and this notion of that our executive function, do we always have a choice about how things should go. And he did this experiment where he gave a certain group of the students at Stanford some numbers, and they were easy to remember. And he gave another group of students some complex numbers that were very difficult to remember, and that their job was to remember these numbers till they got to the end point of wherever he said this experiment was going to be done. And one group had a relatively easy time with this, and the other group had a relatively challenging time with this. So that their executive function, how they had to remember their memories, their orientation to this learning event, had different stress on the brain. Halfway through the experiment, there was food given. One group had food that everybody had access to the same food. And on this access point to the same food, they had fruits and vegetables and good wholesome foods, crackers and cheese and grapes and all sorts of yummy things that were very healthy. And also on this plane of the table, they had cakes and cookies and sugary desserts and breads and all sorts of yum things. What Dr. Sheave came up with was the individuals whose executive function in their brain was overwhelmed with this thing that they had to do were significantly more attracted to the high sugar, high carb, yum foods on that table. Whereas the individuals who had a relatively easy task that did not complicate the executive function had the discernment to go after the yummy, healthy foods, the crackers, the cheese, the fruits, the vegetables. So what that tells you is that this environmental cue early on has a great deal to do with the executive function of the individual and then their ability to have choice. So when we think about the person who's drinking, well, it's a choice. Don't know about that. Were they so challenged in their mind with whatever was going, the stressors, especially the young ones that are drinking at 8, 9, 10 years old, the college kid, the high school kid, were things in such a way that it wasn't a choice. It was a natural conclusion for them to go after something that would relieve their stress. So when we're looking at this drug called alcohol, mind yourself to not get trapped into one view over another, that this one view is it was the family that caused this to happen, or they were weak, or they were just wild and wanted to experiment. They were always living on the edge. Don't look at it from that context. Look at it from the totality of behavioral cues, underlying metabolic proclivities, and that a repetitive behavior, how it can change the neurotapestry of the individual to make this answer be the solution to that problem. And when I, again, say problem, I'm not talking about negative. I'm talking about like a math problem. I have this. This is the outcome I want. Here's the way to it. Okay. Any questions?
There it is. Well, other than, a lot of really good information. Don't have a whole lot of time. I just want to get a couple in there. So, kind of just has been the conversation ongoing. If a family or a family member, a loved one has somebody that's struggling with alcoholism, they're starting, maybe the individual, they're starting to see DTs or whatever it might be, what should they do with that individual?
Well, first and foremost, don't try to detox them in your home. If the person is exhibiting some physiological responses, they may need to go to a hospital because you don't want them to die from detoxing. The individual who is experiencing the loved one, please get yourself some help. It will be dependent on, it's not one size fits all. So if you are the one who's noticing the problem, get the help you need. Get your children the help they need within that family system. Like if somebody if an adult is overusing, get the help for the system and attempt to put the other person in the pathway of some change. But don't believe that you're going to find a way to fix that person. What you have to do is fix the system so that it becomes less attractive for you to have this in your life. Does that make sense? I mean, that's a roundabout way of saying get the help for yourself. Don't try to do anything else. You can't.
Sure. Well, I thank you so much once again for doing this. For those who are going to be tuning in to next week's Monday podcast, what can they expect to hear?
I think what we're going to look at next week, I think we're going to probably look at opioids. I think that's where I'm going to go, is with opiates.
Wonderful. Well, we're so excited once again to have you on, to be able to be doing this for us. For those of you who are listening, every Monday we do science. Every Wednesday we do meditations, and then Friday we are doing interviews. Thank you so much, and we will see you this Wednesday.